Just gonna grab a drink before we start. Okay.
Hello?
Hey, yep. Good to go.
Okay. So what did you work on?
So I finished off the RSP thing. Didn't really watch much of the Analyzing Lies video. And I wrote a thing this morning that as some writing practice that I think might be interesting to look at later. Or we can look at it whenever, but yeah.
Is that the one on FI?
Yes, yep. Yeah, I posted FI an hour ago or so. Cool. So, yep, there's links at the top of that, at the top of the notes thing. But that works too.
Is this the same one as FI? Or is this
Yep,
something
yep.
different?
No, it's the same one.
404.
Oh, I must have linked it wrong. It should be under posts on the left. Or there.
Yeah, I don't see it under posts.
Oh, the top one, sorry, it's practice.
This?
Yep. Yeah, I
I
probably
was
shouldn't have tagged it like that, but yep.
looking for the RSP one.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, the RSP one's under it's on the same page as the old one. So like on Analyzing Lies under the left, the 03 RSP quote. Or RSP quote is the one.
Here we go.
Yep. So I've just added a section at the bottom. I didn't change the first stuff too much, so that it was clear what I added and things. I didn't think that it was particularly necessary. So in my, like where we got up to last week, the second to last section that I had about Tipler and things and the reference to John Eccles and Peter Medawar. So I didn't think I needed to add anything more to that. I did, however, copy the section for the next quote and then expand on that. So that's where the analysis today picks up.
Okay, so how did this go, like writing it or understanding it?
Yeah, I think it was sort of okay. I didn't make as many claims about like particular dishonest behavior in this, though I do have some. In the first section there, I added I'm not sure if I changed the first and last paragraph at all, but the middle two paragraphs are new. I didn't think so I said like I started off by saying he somewhat contradicts himself, but I didn't explain that, and so I felt like I should do that, and then there's just a little expansion, and then sort of the last paragraph from before. Yeah, so oh yeah, I've got no sort of like bolded bits in most of these paragraphs, most of these sections. Some of it was like a little unclear that I sort of point out in terms of what he's saying. I'm not quite sure what he's necessarily getting at. So there's a few different interpretations at 1 or 2 points. But yeah, but I don't think I had much trouble understanding it. I was sort of a bit surprised by some of it when I read it more closely, though, in that I've read it before, but yeah, reading it closely was a bit of a different experience this time. So that was good, I thought.
I'm reading this. I wonder if he thinks that his prior stuff was rational argument, so he was using the force of
Oh, as in
rational argument.
sort of this is the generalization of his particular case beforehand. I mean, I get the feeling that that's not incompatible. Like, he goes on like towards the end. He sort of says the same applies to CR, and where's the oh, this is what it felt like at Warwick with the ECA. So I think he sort of is making that sort of statement there, like he's putting it in the middle of that, and he talks about Warwick before and after. So it does make sense that he. So I guess he thinks it's rational argument, which is sort of not very good. Anyway, yeah, I was quite surprised by some of that in terms of like his outright saying that.
Okay, so
Yeah,
he tries
sorry,
to
go on.
explain himself because he gets to the point where he says the same applies to CR. He's saying like this stuff will apply to CR.
Mm. It's annoying that he doesn't separate out paragraphs there because
Yeah.
it gets a bit jumbled.
I don't think this makes much sense at all, but like he says the same applies to CR. And then he says this next sentence, and it's unclear if this next sentence is supposed to be the same, like a restatement of what the same is, or if it's supposed to be a different point.
Yeah, so I noticed that it was like confusing like that. The reason I think it's confusing is particularly because he swaps like persona or perspectives when he says that. Like my interpretation like was I think he was talking like in the guise of like a non-critical rationalist teacher. Um yeah, like he's saying, because the quote is yeah, if one imprudently allows sound counter argument into one's safe space, beware the corruption of one's cherished beliefs. Like I think imprudently is the main reason that like the main signal that he's changed sort of perspective there. But you need to read a bit more to figure that out. It's not obvious that his yeah, that there's been like a change there. If he hasn't changed, then I don't see like if he hasn't changed perspective, if he's still speaking like from his own perspective and generally, then I don't think it makes sense because it's pretty obviously not compatible with critical rationalism. particularly like imprudently allowing sound counter arguments.
Yeah, it's hard to tell what he even means by a safe space, because he's using it like sarcastically to attack wokes, but
Yeah,
his sentence needs there to be some positive concept there. Like he's sarcastically calling something a safe space, and he means that it's different than a woke safe space. But he does mean something, and you have to know what it is.
yeah. I
Like,
mean,
is it
it sounds like
mind?
he's using. Yeah, that's what I thought, was that the safe space is like the inner workings of your mind, or like where you keep ideas in your head type thing. Um, that's sort of what it seemed to me as, because like otherwise, and I agree, it's like it doesn't really make sense, or it's not qualified. Um, Quoting it like that goes against the change of perspective thing, but if he didn't quote it, then he might be seen as like endorsing it or something. So I can sort of understand that, but there's mixed signals here. Um, it is definitely a signal of some kind, though. The funny thing is, though, like just thinking about this, um, he says, like he's giving the Warwick example, I think, as an example of being extroverted. So, and then he goes on to link that back to CR, but he beforehand also admits that like extroversion isn't important. So it sort of seems a bit confused in that he's using it for two different things that aren't like the same, or necessarily even agree in any way, like they're sort of orthogonal. Or he's making the point they're orthogonal, but then using it as an example of critical rationalism, like it's or of what he thinks is good. So it's sort of it's jumbled.
Okay, so make this lightsaber comment. Violence, yeah. Social framing, Jedi, Star Wars.
So I don't like discuss much about Star Wars, but I think Star Wars is like bad to frame Jedi's as like good people anyway. Um, but that's sort of, I don't think that comes into it here.
The Jedis are a biologically exclusive group of people who control the world with their superior ability to fight, I think.
Um, the biology is maybe slightly ambiguous because like midichlorians were shoved in there in episode 1, and they're all of different races, but it's definitely like something innate about them is what makes them exclusive. It's not something that someone could learn or whatever else. So I think
Yeah.
it's close enough to biology.
I thought
But yeah,
midichlorians were biological. Doesn't it
uh,
run in families as well?
yes, though it's never really expanded. Like Luke and Leia are both force sensitive, but like it's sort of other people are force sensitive without having any family stuff, so it's sort of not really explored much. They sort of and they don't talk about midichlorians again, I think, throughout the films at least. But it's definitely the family thing is there. Like he could have used any uh like overpowered reference, like a rocket launcher or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I think it's like he chose lightsaber particularly because of a lot of those sort of connotations.
He also just mentioned knights, and lightsabers are designed as a sort of sword.
Yeah, well, that Jedi's are Jedi Knights. Like, there's a lot of common themes running through that.
The Bronze Age point, what happens in people in the Bronze Age? Yeah, a lot more conquering than convincing.
Yeah, that was one thing that like I did realize that I was maybe not reading that closely enough, which is why I've got the stepping back paragraph next. In that he is talking about like being given a lightsaber for a battle, so the battle is like a precondition sort of thing, which I think reveals other things, but it's not as bad as like um going to battle because you've got a lightsaber, sort of thing. Like it's not actively seeking violence necessarily.
He says having
Having
is
an
like being given. I think that's notable as well.
Yeah. Um, I didn't spot that before because yeah, he's not seeing like, you know, when you get a flash of inspiration during a debate, it's like this. Um, it's a weird comparison. It's a bit lazy.
Yeah, you'd think having would be like having. But he specifically is like someone hands it to you. So it seems like he conceives of strong arguments as things that you find in books that you don't think of yourself, and that's where he got all of his.
Mm.
And then it's weird that he wrote a book in that context when he can't think of his own arguments.
Yeah. Well, might explain. I'm not sure how many people have read the book, but I imagine not many. That's true of most philosophy books, though.
Already going to be a battle. I think he thinks strong arguments are like extra rational.
Yeah, I thought it was notable that he said strong argument here because uh like there's a lot of things people would consider strong arguments that aren't rational. Um, like there's strong emotional arguments or something like that. Uh, so I thought it was yeah, sort of notable because why would I mean is a not strong argument a rational argument, but just one that doesn't like apply to this case or something? Like a reason to be wrong is a reason to be wrong. It doesn't matter like if it's big or not. I just googled this book as well. It's like 70 Australian dollars. I'm not sure if that's just a weird thing with this site, but yeah, that seems like a lot of
I
money.
don't know. I've read some of it. I didn't like it. Obscure books sometimes don't do well in like foreign markets for pricing and how they become available.
Yeah. It's a bit over $40 on both Kindle and paperback on Amazon. That's a bit better at least.
You can't wait to go hit Bronze Age people with a lightsaber.
Yeah,
That doesn't sound fun at all.
I was so surprised by like I mean so it's a confusing thing. It's not like I can't wait to go out there and use it. It's like you can't wait to go out there and use it, which is weird and confusing, but it's definitely like pro going out there and using it. Um,
Yeah,
which
you
would
means basically everyone.
I think yeah, there's
It's just people in general.
oh yeah. The I don't know what it's saying though, because like you simply can't wait to go out there and use it. Is that like an eagerness or an urgency thing? I think there are actually problems with both of those interpretations. Um, like it's so I sort
I
of
read it as eager.
um, so the
I don't think he was trying to paint a picture of like your Bronze Age allies are counting on you. You can't wait because they're like dying in the field. So you have to rush out there. You know, he
well
didn't really
I
tell that story.
no the urgency the way that I thought about the urgency side was more like how you talk about ideas and like people's quality of thinking in the world in general, and like the idea that we need to like improve this and care about the rate of improvement, and improving that rate sort of thing. That's more like how I interpreted the urgency. Like we shouldn't wait to use critical arguments. Was that side, but I don't think I actually concluded anything there in terms of
Okay,
how
yeah,
to make
that
that.
the way you're meaning urgency is then similar to eagerness. Like you would be eager because you think improving your
Oh yeah,
life
yeah, yep,
fast is urgent. So they would go together in
that's fair.
that case, anyways.
Yep. There's another more condescending way of looking at it where it's like, you know, it's urgent that we go out and civilize the barbarians sort of attitude, which is not necessarily eager in the same way. So I found this also really odd because he doesn't talk about convincing anyone or like, he seems to count the Warwick example as like a victory, but not because he convinced them that they were wrong, but because he got to use a strong argument against them and they, you know, yeah.
Yeah, that does seem to be the story. He found other people's arguments to throw at them, and they didn't have good enough other people's arguments to throw back, so he was winning.
But
Um,
one of the things, oh, yep,
go ahead.
I was going to say one of the things that's odd to me, it's sort of like, um, if play a game for a while that, you've got like a really long level progression to go through, and, halfway or three-quarters of the way through or something, you stop and think like, why am I bothering to do this anymore? And you just lose all sort of interest. Um, that sort of feeling is what I like. Why hasn't he had that sort of feeling about winning arguments, in the sense that there's substance behind winning arguments, but only if you like are doing good with it, not if you just win for the sake of winning. Otherwise, what progress are you making? There's no outcome that matters at the end of it. You're just doing a thing to do a thing. Um, so it sort of seems really contradictory in that, like, if you're saying you can't wait to go out there and use it, there should be some like positive outcome or change that then like necessitates. Like if it's urgent, it has to do something. Whereas like the only picture is painted is one where the reason it's urgent is because you've just, like metaphorically killed a bunch of people type thing. So now the problem's gone away. Um, as opposed to like, convincing them that how they were living was not a good way to live and that they should join your society instead, or something like that in a Bronze Age analogy. Like it seems really weird and short-sighted or superficial.
Yeah, I don't think he looks at life the way you're talking about, like trying to accomplish goals and getting bored when you're like winning too easily at games. Um, I think that it's sort of like his version of partying, and like a lot of people can just keep partying and still like that, and they never like change their mind or get tired of it.
Yeah, okay. I mean, people definitely do that. So I guess there's no reason you couldn't do that with philosophy instead of, or arguments instead of drinking. But
Yeah,
it's it seems way more out of place for a philosopher to do that than, for someone who enjoys partying.
I think that's an incorrect perspective. So like I can see why you would think that from sort of a logical or analytical point of view. If you think, what should a philosopher be? What was Socrates? Is he doing that? And then it doesn't fit well. But what is a philosopher actually? In general, in most cases, he is a normal person with normal preferences, social behavior, and so on. A bit on the nerdy side, but within like generally normal. Who who goes to university and takes some terrible classes and reads some old books, which does not like fundamentally change him or make him wise or anything. There's no part of that process where he becomes good at life or similar to Socrates or any of that.
It's sort of interesting in that I'm not sure if I've always just thought this, but like I've always well, I feel like I've always thought that uh, philosophy somehow has a big component of like introspection or self-evaluation or like contemplation on these sorts of things. Um, like I expect that, Max 10, 15 years ago would have agreed that, a philosopher who doesn't consider what they do themselves is not a good not a good philosopher. Yeah, so I'm not sure. It's sort of I don't think I've considered the sort of general picture you just painted there, but it makes sense. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
philosophy has some main themes, and they communicate more than nothing at school. People do get ideas like they should try to introspect, they should try to be objective, they should do more logical analysis than the typical person instead of just completely ad hoc, like whim, and so on. And they make some effort to do it, but they don't really develop the skills to be very good at it, so it just doesn't work that well.
hmm
And they read a
it's
lot of
also
like very confusing books like Kant that are very
yeah,
hard to apply to their life. And they sort of associate philosophy with like using a bunch of big words and making
struggling.
grand claims and not having clear answers, like having open problems.
Yeah, yeah. It's one interesting thing I've just thought is the idea of stepping back or being introspective or stuff like that is so arguably it's within the purview of philosophy. There's not many other schools that could claim to, you know, have something over that. But it's not something that's like practiced particularly in philosophy compared to other stuff. Like psychology advocates a lot of that sort of thing, or like Jordan Peterson is not a philosopher, for example, but he's got a big thing about introspecting. Um, it's interesting that it seems like it's far more in the common sense bucket than like modern philosophy or like the modern ideas about philosophy bucket. Um, generally speaking, which is yeah, a bit curious.
Okay, so how did RSP make it sound like there was an obligation to use the lightsaber?
Um, well, so he swaps to second person. So he's talking to us, sort of thing. He's speaking generally,
Yeah, people in general.
the the idea of saying you is there's implications of like relevance and applicability and things like that there. He's also saying can't wait. Um, so because I mean, it's sort of I feel like the word that fits better is you shouldn't wait. Um, but
Yeah,
can't.
people say this all the time though. They're like, I can't wait for the new video game to come out.
Yeah, that's I'm I'm not exactly sure what can't wait is meaning here, but it feels different to the video game or the movie or whatever else.
I
Uh,
I I read it as basically the same as the video game. Can't wait for Christmas or whatever.
um, yeah. So he's sort of saying, in general, people should feel a sense of urgency and anticipation and excitement about getting to use it, sort of thing. Then, so in that light, it's less of an obligation and more of like either a judgment or, uh, yeah, like a reflection on how we should feel. Um, I thought it was more of an obligation because I read it more in the urgency sense, as in like one
I see.
shouldn't wait to go out there and use it. And because of that, it seems more like the corollary that if you do wait, that's bad, feels more natural. Whereas with the you can't wait, um, like for Christmas, uh, that sort of feels less substantial. Um, I mean, it's sort of obvious that in most of those times we say we can't wait, the thing that people do is just wait. Might do other stuff, but they end up spending that time uh, regardless. Um, yeah,
I read him as thinking that it is obviously desirable And so when he says you, he
Mm.
means basically anyone would totally wanna get out there and use it. Like if you're trekking through the desert and someone hands you a bottle of water, you can't wait to drink it because you're thirsty. Like obviously in that situation you'd want it. There's not really any disagreement that water is desirable. So I think he sees it kind of like that, and he's just assuming everyone else will be like, yeah, I want that too. I wish I had your life where I got to do that over and over.
Yeah, so the other thing about the obligation part was it was particularly, I wrote that in response to joining the last two sentences, or the previous two sentences. So like having a strong argument, where was it? Yeah, is like being given a lightsaber for battle in the Bronze Age. You simply can't wait to get out there and use it. And that actually, I think that actually speaks to the eagerness point more, reading it again now. Like, having a strong argument is like knowing that there's a great present for Christmas. You simply can't wait to open it. That sort of thing. But I think these two sentences are more connected than most of the sentences, most of the pairs of sentences throughout the post.
Yeah, one of the themes here I think is fighting is fun when you're winning.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Can't wait to use it because you know you're going to win, or you believe you're going to win regardless of whether you do or not. As opposed to like, you know, debating people is fun because you can choose good people who will give you new ideas or challenge your ideas or something like that. Um, it's interesting. Like a lot of people will say that they enjoy doing like competitive things. I'm sort of generalizing to sports and stuff here, but the reason that they enjoy doing competitive things is because it's difficult. Like, playing a card game competitively where you're one-on-one, your win rate is like 50%. They enjoy it because it's always a challenge and no victory is cheap. This is like the opposite of what RSP is saying. He's saying that it's like it's more fun the more
Yeah,
overpowered you are, which is really weird. Um,
it's not weird you have self-selected people you talk with. Um, so if you look at the gaming industry as a whole, and gamers themselves are self-selected, but even
mm,
in that self-selected group, how many are the type who want a challenge, and how many are the type who don't want a challenge? Like rough estimates.
um, in terms of, I mean, I'm sort of correcting for obviously some people want one some of the time and others other times, but vastly the experiences that are non-challenging or fake challenging. So like World of Warcraft PvE is like fake challenging, right? You can just breeze through it essentially. So yeah, they're vastly more fake challenges than there are like proper competitive stuff. Um, yeah.
So it's interesting that you brought up World of Warcraft as a fake challenge because it is far on the hardcore end of the spectrum in the current gaming landscape.
I meant like particularly player versus environment as opposed to PvP.
Yeah,
Um,
yes, that.
oh, oh, okay.
That
Oh, you like with
World of
WoW
Warcraft
Classic
is
and
a
stuff?
serious game. Yeah, sure. Either one is a serious game compared to most games. Um, PC gaming is more serious than console, which is more serious than mobile. So
Yep.
if you compare World of Warcraft PvE to some of the like console games, single
Oh yeah.
player, you know what I mean? Like a lot
There
of those
definitely
are
is more.
actually more of just a walkthrough with some movies in between and
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean that's true. There are like, I mean, WoW will obviously you can like grind more or whatever else to make things less of a challenge, but it's definitely like there's a lot more going on there, and a lot of the stuff you need to like compete with other, or not compete with other people, but like cooperate with other people or things. Makes me think a little bit of like JRPGs and stuff where they're like they can be really tough, even though they're single player. Um, yeah, okay, so it's not like entirely. I mean, some of WoW is like that. Like you can definitely quest your way pretty casually. Um, I guess that's like, yeah, a lot of my experience with single player World of Warcraft has been not very challenging. Not all of it. Some of it's been way more challenging. Yeah, but in general, I sort of, I follow what you mean. I think
78% say stress relief. But what I really want, I've seen genre breakdowns. There's an upper echelon gamers video that had some recently, and yeah, it was kind of focused on females, but it was like females skew heavily to mobile and to puzzle and farming games, simulator stuff. And by puzzle, they mean basically match 3, like not hard
like,
puzzles at all.
yeah, like Candy Crush, not like Sudoku, where you only get one number to start with.
Sudoku is on the list of popular stuff, I think. But yeah, I
Uh,
don't know. I don't know how the difficulty varies, and I'm not that familiar with it.
if you have enough numbers to start with, you can like finish any puzzle in like under a minute. With
Oh,
some of
okay, so
the
it's how empty it is
there are
that determines the difficulty.
most of the
So you
time,
can
yeah.
play it on easy mode.
Yeah. And then for each puzzle, there's like a minimum number of things that need to be filled in to start with, like a minimum set of information that you need to actually be able to complete it uniquely. And they're typically the harder ones where there's like a lot of deduction or, like going through the entire 81 squares to, find one new number and then doing that again like 10 times. So it can be quite time consuming that way as well. But
Yeah,
it's
so this
definitely like low pressure.
this one's gender, and you see that females are up here in these things. Match
Yep.
3, casual puzzle, family/farm sim. But if you just find like non-gendered breakdowns of what genres are popular, things like MMORPGs and MOBAs, aren't even that popular in the scheme of things.
Mm.
Like, if you look at like all people and then how many actually try in those kinds of games, compared to like getting out their phone now and then on breaks.
Yeah.
Like mobile gaming's huge. Yeah, a lot of people do not try to play games to win. And a lot of genres like aren't even about trying to play seriously. Like there's plenty of League of Legends players who are dumb and don't try that much. But there's other genres that are like much worse, you know?
Yep.
And are huge.
So I don't know if yeah, okay. So I found an article about this thing that looked like it had the same graph that you did. And anyway, of the three like citation links at the beginning of the thing, two are 404s. Um,
Similarly, you can see like Fortnite's super popular right now in the whole battle royale genre. What's a battle royale? It's a giant FFA instead of 1v1s in order to make it like much less competitive.
yeah, everyone gets a middle of or the typical thing is getting a middle of the road sort of ranking.
Yeah. And there's like teaming, like you team up on whoever's in the lead, for example.
Yeah,
So that there's skill equaling out kind of dynamics when you have 3 or more teams.
yep.
So like being the best doesn't correlate nearly as well to winning in FFAs. So yeah, that's some sort of indication of what people are like, what the world's like.
So I what do you call it? Searched on I've what do you call it? Been using DuckDuckGo a bit lately, but particularly with like programming searches, um, the results from Google are very superior. Anyway, I figured since you searched on Bing that I'd search here. And it's interesting that like gamer genre demographics poll comes like gender, 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 gender. Uh, this there's maybe gender. Um, it's sort of interesting that everything Google suggests is about gender.
Maybe it's the word demographics.
That probably, yeah. I mean, compared to age, I guess that's gender's more interesting demographically. Um,
Most popular video game genre is 2018. action. Oh, this looks like it doesn't include mobile though.
Oh yeah, that's a not very detailed breakdown.
Yeah, but just looking at what they have, I don't think mobile is on this. But I did get a non-gendered one when I took out demographics. And then I got a bunch of things that aren't stats. Oh well.
Yeah.
Anyways, you're right that there are plenty of World of Warcraft PvE players who don't think very much and are not playing competitively. But then there's a ton more games that are even less serious. Like
Yes.
even the
Yeah.
relatively good games can often be played in a fairly mindless way, like League of Legends is more of a real game, but you can play it casually.
Yep.
But then there's a lot of games that are pretty much only played casually and are very popular.
Yes. Yeah. Um, Candy Crush et al.
Yeah, and speedrunners have been showing how easy all the console games actually are. Like, if you're actually good, you just blaze through everything.
Yes. Yeah.
And like how different the speedrunner plays it versus the regular person, even in glitchless, just shows you how they're not very good at the games and they never really try to be like regular players.
I watched like GDQ has been doing a bunch of stuff recently. Saw an Oblivion speedrun, a glitchless Oblivion speed. Oh, sorry, not glitchless, but no major skips, no major glitches, one of those sort of things. Anyway, yeah. So it was
Yeah.
35 minutes, I think. Um, it's insane how, yeah, when you optimize this stuff, like because it's made to be maybe slightly challenging on your first playthrough when you don't know anything about what you're encountering. Um, Not doing
Yeah.
like any tactical stuff about, the type of enemy you're facing or stuff like that. Um, yeah, it's yeah, but I mean, a lot of it, I guess, is only to superficially challenge, um, which speedrunning sort of shows. But yeah, so I guess there are like it's a common enough idea that you do like the things that you should do or enjoy doing are somewhat like not challenging. Um, I guess you sort of see this in movies as well, even though there's no interaction, but people talk about like hard movies to watch, as in, the ones that like ask questions or make you feel things that you haven't felt before type thing. Consider things that you haven't considered. But
Yeah.
yeah,
If you're finding movies hard, um, that sounds meaningful about what kind of person you are.
yeah. I sort of I mean, I understand it from the point of view mostly of like I'm not in the mood right now type thing. Never being able to be in the mood or not being able to deal with it when you aren't in the mood is also a problem. But yeah, I know there are plenty of people who just avoid like entire categories of movies. I think probably most people do, um, for those sort of reasons, as opposed to like stylistic reasons, like not enjoying horror in general or something like that, which is just more taste. But um, yeah, I feel like it's particularly bad for RSP to be espousing that sort of thing on a CR forum, like that the easy life is the good life sort of thing. It's very anti-gold rat, putting it that way.
Yeah.
He can't use a hammer though because I think he part of his like idea about self-worth or whatever is viewing himself as intellectual. Um, so he wants both easy and high status.
Yeah, that reminds me of another way you can look at communities. And I think it gives significant information about what kind of people make them up and so on. Is like they form around one thing like Bays or Popper. or Rand, do they manage to be interested in and find other good things? Or are they just like a one-hit wonder? And they
Yeah.
never really manage to figure out that anything else is also good? Like, a lot of the CR people haven't even moved on to Deutsch and, like, added that.
Yeah, I mean, that feels so weird to me, I guess because of the way that I ended up here. But I mean, then again, I haven't read Fabric of Reality still. I've sort of read bits, uh, but Deutsch just seems like such a pivotal figure in recent critical rationalism. Like I'm not aware of anything, like any comparable books written in the last few decades, um, on CR particularly.
Yeah, I don't know. But they're
But yeah,
certainly not finding things like Goldratt and Rand and branching out and realizing there are other good ideas out there.
yeah, I mean, the more I think about it, the funnier it sort of seems in terms of, um, like the Berner's criticism of critical rationalism, like particularly being the inability of people to adopt other ideas or other traditions, and then, but if you actually try and, you know, if you like eagerly found, or found something out and eagerly brought it to them, it's like, oh hey, I found this cool idea over here. Often you then get like shunned for it. Or there's like negative social consequences.
Yeah, or just ignored. People don't want to read that many
Mm,
books or whatever. And sometimes
yeah,
they're like, oh, that sounds interesting, and then just nothing really comes of it. They never get around to like learning enough for it to make much difference to them.
yep, cool.
So yeah, that's what it felt like at Warwick with ECA. It's yeah, his perspective is awful. And then that awful thing, when he says the same applies to CR, he means that awful thing.
Yeah.
That's assume what before? This.
Oh, that he was like linking the things to CR. Um, like, oh, sorry, the this
Oh, weren't
is.
incorrect. There's a double negative as well. I didn't
Oh yeah,
notice that
sorry.
right away. Kind of a triple.
Yeah, because of the wrong. Um,
Well, wrong, but
reveals we were okay to assume this before. That was probably a better way to put it. I often say stuff like weren't incorrect because I actually changed weren't wrong to assume this before to weren't incorrect because I didn't want to make a moral judgment there. Um,
why
but
not were correct?
um, because it feels like there's um, the like boundary of the set sort of thing. In that not like there's an excluded middle ground between correct and incorrect. And weren't incorrect. If something was incorrect, it's wrong. If something was correct, it's right. But there's a boundary line in between. So that's often why I use double negatives, sort of
Yeah,
to indicate that
I think
boundary
you should
condition.
try
But
to avoid them. If you don't want to use correct, you have other options that are weaker, like reasonable. It
yeah,
revealed we were
well,
reasonable to think this before.
okay is enough. Like we were okay to assume this before. Is
Yeah.
yeah. Um, no, I should try and catch myself more on that.
Yeah, it definitely seems like some sort of joke. It's in quotes.
Yeah, I just couldn't figure out what it.
And he doesn't have like a woke vibe to him when he's talking about punching people in the jaw.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely
He
like
didn't accuse
yeah.
them of being Nazis first.
Um, it was. Well, I mean, he was at least being metaphorical, but um, yeah, no, I'm not actually sure he. No, he doesn't. I mean, he mentions that they were socialists or whatever, but that's sort of all the justification he has there. Um, I also just realized he implies that like all of their arguments, like their entire position, and this happened like repeatedly with every person, sort of thing, He just used the one trick sort of thing. It was always the ECA.
Yeah.
It was just, oh, I put you in a bucket. I'm just going to throw this at you. This is the U-shaped spear. But yeah.
I think what he means by allowing it is something about like not refuting it. Like just sort of letting it be there so you have contradictions in your mind.
Oh, okay. I interpreted it more as like actually like letting yourself think about it sort of thing. Like that shutting your mind is what wouldn't be allowing it, which sort of implies that in whatever frame he's arguing that point from, it's like don't pay attention to sound counter arguments because they'll corrupt your cherished beliefs. But as opposed to like if you don't refute sound counter arguments, it's sort of like sound makes me think that like refutation is being particularly like excluded from this situation.
I think maybe
Um,
safe space equals castle and sound counter argument equals like soldier.
like a legitimate threat as opposed to just an arbitrary threat sort of thing.
Yeah. So like
Yeah.
they're assaulting your castle, so don't let them in. You have to fight them off with your lightsaber. Because if they get in, they'll sack the place.
Yep. Steal your things and murder your people or whatever else. So I found
I
the
think he, I think he's sort of trying to say you have to fight back against the counter arguments. If they're sound, they have to be fought off. As opposed to if they're like stupid, then you can just laugh at them. But if they're like a good counter argument for the other side, you have to fight with it in order to protect your side.
well, he's definitely like saying that something is dangerous, as in beware. X is like to say that harm can be done or something like that from X. Imprudent means that we have a choice. Allowing is the action. So he's sort of saying that like sound counter arguments are dangerous either to cherished beliefs or safe spaces. Which I guess makes sense. I don't like the use of the word dangerous, but like a good refutation of something does mean that it's not true. That much at least is sort of thing there. But why we have so much control over it, like the imprudently, that I'm not sure what sort of point is trying to make there. Yeah, because it's in this like negative frame at the same time. This like, yeah, it's sort of like an overly honest person who doesn't believe in CR or something or other. Like overly honest in that they're saying things like sound counter argument as opposed to, whatever they normally call it. It's a weird thing to say. I mean, he could also like do stuff like quoting, like using scare quotes sort of thing around various words that were like incorrect to sort of like point them out, like imprudently allow sound arguments into a safe space, beware the corruption to one's cherished beliefs. Like if you did that, then at least there'd be some sort of theme about the negative things in there, in that all of these things are wrong. Like it's not imprudent, we shouldn't see it as a safe space, and it's not corruption. That would at least be something consistent. But it's sort of, it feels like there's too many ideas in the one sentence, and it comes off really weird. Not to mention the whole poetic overtone, or poetic sort of way that he's tried to phrase it, which I think is just social signaling for no good reason.
Yeah, I agree about the poetry and that there's too much stuff and that it's quite unclear. Is there a typo here?
Which part are you?
Can you see the highlight?
Yep, you'll find things you stop believing, some stuff you like to believe. You'll find, yeah, there is a typo somewhere. Let me see if I can fix it. You'll find, that you stop believing some stuff you like to believe. That's, yeah. So just find things to that. Oh, you'll find that.
Yeah, imprudent is strange. It's a very like mild word, but he's been talking about lightsaber battles.
Yeah. I mean, I can sort of read it like unwise, like it's unwise to allow a sound calm argument into one safe space, and if you do, you should beware of the corruption.
Can one prudently allow it?
Yeah,
Is there an
other times,
alternative?
um,
Or is this just redundant?
I think he's sort of trying to say that it's always imprudent. It was just how I read it, but that's sort of a
Yeah,
point in that.
so I think it's
Yeah,
redundant.
it does. One thing it does function as is it makes it much clearer that he's swapped perspectives, or swapped like points of view. Like beware is a bit more general. Like imprudent is very, like there's no way to interpret that as something different, right? But particularly in like poetic stuff, beware is not always used to indicate like a clear judgment about the thing beforehand.
Okay, so let's take a look through my email about this and try to go quickly and look for similarities and differences. Okay, so I attack the I think. Right, this implies he analyzed the text. This one implies he thought about whether it was dead on or not. These things are not the mental processes he went through. Attacking introverts, bragging. We talked about that stuff. Yeah, we talked about the grant being kind of fake in an attack. You remember that,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Um, I was trying to sort of look at mine and yours at the same time, but I don't think that's going to work very well. Or it's not going to be very quick, so I'm just going to focus on yours.
Okay, so the completely happy isn't true.
Yeah.
Lying about debating all of them. Right, he said he has a go at them all at once. He didn't do that. He did like a couple at a time, maybe sometimes.
It's curious to think about that sentence. Like if he said, "I'm completely happy when surrounded by justificationists, just so I can have a go at them all at once," um, because it's like got a time aspect there. It makes a lot more sense in terms of being able to like have a go at them all at once or whatever, as well as like, yeah. It's sort of anyway. It's just sort of an interesting choice that is put it in this like stateless, perpetual way.
I think this is a good point. He's exaggerating how much he liked it in order to make his bragging sound nicer. He's presenting the story he'd like to have happened, that he thinks is impressive, and it's not. He's not going for accuracy when he tells the story.
Yeah.
I don't think the debates went as well for him as he's telling us.
No, that's why he's got to exemplify so much. He doesn't have like anything better to talk about like these things. He's got to like round them off at the corners and make it sound epic.
Oh yeah, yeah. The scientists don't value Popper as much as he's suggesting, like calling them Popperian knights or something. Like these were not massive advocates of Popper. Like if you think about how Deutsch advocates Popper,
He takes it
yeah,
seriously.
yeah, and he writes about he writes actual CR material and stuff. Like these people are not doing the same sort of advocacy.
Well, I mean, I think Deutsch has only written the 2 books, right? Or published the 2 books so far.
Yeah.
They're both about philosophy. How many scientists go out and only publish books about philosophy and Popper instead of like, obviously they've got, physics material in there, but they're far more about philosophy from what I can tell. Yeah, other scientists aren't like that. Those 2 guys aren't like that.
So Alan, the resident physicist, knew something relevant about Tipler.
Yeah. That's sort of interesting as well. Like, I mean, it's also not incompatible with like Tipler describing Popper's Logic of Scientist Discovery as one of the most
Right,
important
he could
books.
totally be a Bayesian and give a praise quote, but you shouldn't take it as the praise is all that important when he's a Bayesian.
Well, I think a lot of the Bayesian stuff came after Popper, right? Partially because Popper's like, there was, well, the first half of last century was, there was a lot of, criticisms of inductivism. And so I sort of like that, or I find it humorous that Bayesians claim not to be inductivists.
What they usually claim to be inductivists. They talk
I've
about
heard, well,
Solomonoff induction.
yeah, it sort of seems like, I mean, I'll try and find a thing after this maybe, but in some of the
The
discussions I was
the
having on Live
less
Forum, there
wrong
was,
crowd explicitly says induction all the time.
yeah, I'll see if I can find what I was reading before because it's, um, but yeah, but we don't have to focus on that now. So maybe I'm probably wrong about, well, I'm definitely wrong about that then. That Bayesians claim not to be inductivists.
RSP is not naming anyone from first-hand knowledge. He's just using standard names. So like he's name dropping, but he doesn't even know the names. He's just name dropping based on name drops he's heard, basically. He's like
Yep, it's
repeating
not.
name drops instead of using his own. Which is
Well,
like
yeah. Why wouldn't?
extra empty.
I mean, he works at a. Does he work at a university? Is he doing that sort of stuff, or
Oh, he might be a pro. I don't know.
I sort of presume so because how else do you make a living doing philosophy stuff? But um, the what was I gonna? Oh yeah, the thing there is like, where are the people that he knows now? Like an anecdotal thing, like um, I have like dozens of conversations every year with different scientists at the University of blah or something to that effect. And I talk to them about this stuff, and like they've said, on the whole, blah blah blah. Like that would be a much stronger argument than just name dropping random people who, yeah, it's odd.
This
Yep.
comment, I think it's debatable whether his book even contains non-deep arguments. And
Yeah.
he's just saying he has deep ones.
Um, in depth. I think people sometimes use in depth to mean in breadth, just to say the same thing over and over again for a long time. Um,
Yeah. Okay, so with the fighting, one of the differences is the Bronze Age Knights would admit they lost.
yeah, it's pretty hard to claim that you won when you've got like no limbs left.
Right,
Um,
whereas in his pub brawls, his opponents did not believe that he had won most of the time.
Mm. Yeah.
Basically, he just doesn't like losing arguments like most people, then writes a book about the myth of the closed mind, which, I don't know, not liking losing arguments is one of the things that closes minds.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah, so I think we covered most of this.
definitely hypocritical.
Oh yeah, he used the ECA abbreviation without saying what it was. Like he used the term economic calculation argument, but he didn't put in parentheses ECA, right?
I spent a while, like a good 5+ minutes,
Trying to
Googling
figure out what it was.
ECA because
Yeah.
I was like, oh, is this like the socialist alternative? Like, what's the name of this group? Um, I did actually find, what was it? It was the something, anyway, it was Austrian economics. There was a group like with a name that was very similar to that, but it was about Austrian economics instead. Um, and then, yeah, and I realized after I like Googled more generally, I think it was ECA and socialism I Googled for, and the economic calculation argument came up, and it was like, oh, okay, that's what it is. But it's like with something like that, it reads like the group as opposed to, because isn't that what he was talking about? Like, but no, he was just talking about the place and the argument. That was all he really cared about.
Okay, so that was the detail pass. Now we have the second pass, which is looking at bigger chunks, possibly paragraphs. No, it doesn't look like paragraphs, but wait, his whole thing was one paragraph, wasn't it?
Yeah. Different sentences. Yeah, groups of sentences. Yep.
Right, so in the second pass, you know things like when you read this that he never gets back on topic later. Like the whole rest of the thing doesn't actually address the stuff Berner was talking about in the introvert extrovert stuff. Like it just sort of goes further and further off topic.
Yeah, it's like, here's a thing from the thing. It's about extroversion, but we're not extroverted. Check out this great story I have. Apparently, this is important. Also, the story was good. The end.
Also
Like that's,
lightsabers.
yeah. It's it's sort of funny as well, just like where you've mentioned here, like contrary to Lulie's position. Um, it's sort of funny that he's like, oh, I completely agree with this, and then goes on to like talk in depth with multiple different analogies to violence, where one of Lulu's points is like, it doesn't have to be bad. People can like this legitimately. No one likes being attacked with a lightsaber. There's no like thing there. There's no reason anyone would like that. So it's sort of funny that like there's such a blatant contradiction that early on.
Yeah, this
Oh yeah,
somehow got double posted, so it's in the file twice. That's why the file has a bunch of extra pages. So we're
okay.
near the end, actually. I was wondering how it was going to keep going so long, but it just doesn't. Yeah, so you got bragging, bragging. You got more of like a quick picture in the second pass. Like
Um, the second email I
dishonesty
think.
claims to have thought about the issues. Bragging, bragging, bragging. Book plugging, bragging, bragging. There's there's a lot less stuff in the way, so you just get this condensed. Oh, he's bragging over and over and over again.
Yeah, the reason I think that the second, or that it's like double in the PDF, is that you replied quoting yourself and at the top said, spoilers, don't read this unless you're done. And then it repeats it, but it doesn't have the second set of quotations, but it does have like, on September 27th, Elliot Temple wrote.
Oh, did I add the passes? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, no, just that, so you sent the first email, I think, and then you sent a second email, like in reply to the first email, but with the spoilers thing at the top. It's like 40% of the way down. Oh, it was October 10th as well. So it's like quite some time after. Anyway, yeah, I think it's just because of the way like that you've exported the email things that it seems like it's
Justin
posted
made
twice.
it. Okay, so pass 3. He bragged a lot and had no arguments. Your tentative thoughts. You want to have impression something like, he's above petty arguments. He thought them through and figured out the right conclusions. Rather than go over all the arguments, LT already did a nice job of that. He's willing to let you pull up a chair while he recounts his glorious accomplishments. He absolutely could argue all the issues better than you, but he found reminiscing fun and relevant. He's so wise and has already dealt with so many challenges that he takes lots of this stuff for granted. Which is basically all false.
Yep.
He presents himself a lot like he's me. Lots of what he thinks would impress people is the stuff I do that he doesn't do, that actually tends not to impress people and make a lot of fans. So he kind of just faked his whole life. Okay, so part of why I wanted to go through that was there were a bunch of these, and so I thought like quickly looking through is a skill that would be useful for you. So I wanted to demonstrate it a bit. So that hopefully you can skim through some of the other ones to check for other points and find some additional points and so on.
The other replies people have done.
Yeah.
Yep.
Bunch of different analysis stuff.
Yep. I had a brief look at the stuff I wrote last time as well, which I don't think was necessarily bad at the time, but I think my analysis has gotten a lot more detailed this time.
Yeah, so
My confidence with what I'm saying is a lot lower as well.
yeah. Do you want to go through the Lulie stuff or this one, or move on to something else?
Oh, I'm happy to move on. I don't think oh, you mean of your analysis?
Yeah,
Yeah, let's check out
we
the
could
Lulie
skim
one
through
quickly.
this one for a second example.
Yep. No, I think that's good.
Okay. Okay, so this is not trying to be complete because we'd already had a lot of long discussions. So there are a bunch of other points that got raised in other threads.
Yep.
Okay, so she doesn't sympathize, she's not optimistic, she's attacking stuff which she thinks is pessimistic. Or she's attacking it as, like, pessimism, as opposed to, like, a real opinion. Which is a way to delegitimize things, like, that's just your pessimism talking. So there's the spirit stuff, which is a very common, like, weaselly thing to say.
Yeah. I can sort of see it being appropriate some of the time, but you can't argue against or with a spirit of something. And particularly rejected by the author is important there.
Yeah, so she shouldn't characterize arguments as premises, which just makes them sound like unargued conclusions or claims. Right, and Berner didn't say incompatible, he said less prone. Which indicates degree, not strict incompatibility. So she's being unreasonable with her interpretation, which she did with all of them. Yeah, so this is not an argument, but it's meant to sort of look like one.
Yeah. Well, it's just a like counter statement in terms of it's literally just saying the opposite thing of what
Yeah.
Berner said.
Right. Berner didn't say social networking is special. She's straw manning there.
Well, that he brought up social networking politicking first, and then all sorts of interests, I presume, is Lulie responding to the idea of like CR people being like or not adopting other people's traditions. So and Berner particularly uses the word traditions, I think. Social networking and politicking aren't really like traditions that are particular to like one school of thought or something. Arguably traditions is even like maybe not necessarily the right thing to call them. Politicking is more of a tradition than social networking has been in terms of the modern context, but yeah. So she's sort of summarizing and outlining, but not faithfully.
Right, so it was understandable what was like so-called special about it, which is involved being friendly with people instead of critical, to put it like in just very plain, simple language. So yeah, I think we went over that before.
Yep.
Oh, that's interesting. I say that her previous text was all readable, and then this particular sentence is not.
Yeah, she used like pretty good sentences before. They're all less than like a line long on this page, and this is what 2.5. It's 4 clauses.
Yeah, she spent time around the FI community. And I think picked up some ability to write short paragraphs. So, but yeah, complexity can help hide lack of argument. And the mix can hide it even better, because you had like some simple parts. People are like, okay, you can write simple, and then that was a really complicated argument. That's why it seemed complicated. Whereas if everything's complicated, they might think you're a bad writer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it also, I think, like if you can see simple parts in it, there's one of the things is that you can't evaluate those simple parts because you need to evaluate the other parts of the sentences. It's sort of like an on-ramp to a really complex sentence, but it's not like particularly. It's not much better than writing a really bad sentence. But yeah, this is at least like 4 clear clauses as opposed to, yeah, like some of the stuff that Berner wrote, for example.
Their tone is she's a wise person giving a lecture, and that she's seriously thought through this stuff and has an informed opinion that some significant pondering went into. And this is not true. It's trying to trick people.
Mm.
I give an example from the same group of someone not writing like Lulie in order to contrast.
Yeah, so this PA guy, Quoted piece from Burke. I mean, is OG a typo there, by the way?
Where?
I don't know. Oh, in PA's first quote.
Oh.
I'm not. Superhuman seems like like.
Yeah, I assume it's supposed to be or.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Demand or expect.
Yeah. Okay, that makes more sense. Wow. So
This person is not presenting himself as a
what
wise
is the?
philosopher king who knows all the things and is just telling you what's up and handing out crumbs for the masses.
Yeah. It's sort of. I mean, he dodges the question though entirely.
Oh yeah, I mean there were problems with it, but there's certainly a way
So,
that he's not faking, and so
yes. Yeah.
it's not like everyone fakes. Not everyone does.
Well, I think not faking is often used as a defense, like for this stuff. Like as in, um, it's like I don't want to ask the question. I don't want to deal with any of the issues that might like follow from my interpretations of it, because I'm just going to flag now that I don't know much about it. I'm unqualified or whatever else. But that's then an
Yeah,
excuse not to deal with any of the issues.
there's problems with that, but I think it's better to use "I'm not really an intellectual" as a way to dodge stuff than to pretend to be an intellectual when you're not.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, at the very least, like expectations will be lower. It doesn't necessarily mean like dodging everything is
Yeah.
okay, but you're going to be like people aren't going to be as like harsh, which I think is fair.
Yeah, so she doesn't quote them or do textual analysis. And she's pretending that she like read their text carefully and is doing like high quality analysis where she brainstorms like 4 different assumptions they might be making because she's trying so hard to steal man it and principle of charity it or something, but she's really not.
Yeah.
Yeah, so name dropping and padding out the post.
Hmm.
Right, when she says which does indeed have its flaws, she's implying that people already agree that it's flawed. Like she makes it sound like she's echoing other people who already said
Like it's
this.
common knowledge enough that I don't need to go over it here, sort of thing. That's what it reads like to me, at least.
If it's so easy to work outside the system, why doesn't Lulie do it? We talked about that. And she doesn't give any examples. Like, she's not linking any blogs.
Yeah. I mean, that's just saying like it's becoming easier. Like, just look at, these 5 things. Like, I've got more if anyone wants them. Like, something like that completely changes points like that, but it's just an assertion.
Yeah.
And the fact that other people can't like fill in the gaps there, I don't think anyone else could think of them either. Um, but yeah.
Okay, I think this is important. The way she's misusing BOI's argument. Like, if you replace CR with inductivism, she
Yeah.
would claim that since problems are soluble, you can solve the problem of making inductivism survive without unpleasant academic tedium. There's no way to solve the problem of making it survive at all. Because ability to solve problem means there's a way forward that's like good for people. Doesn't mean there's a way forward where induction survives or CR survives or whatever.
Yeah.
Like we might move on from it.
One of the things that or like became a lot more solid to me after BOI was the idea of not being able to choose the truth. Like you're going to come across things that are true that you don't necessarily like beforehand, but the reaction that people have of like choosing the truth of like saying I prefer this, or pretending that there aren't as serious disagreements, or that there are multiple viable options or things. Um, like those things are outright incompatible with progress at some point. We have to get rid of those ideas, or those ideas can't be, kept in a mainstream for ages. It's interesting here because like problems are soluble is, I mean, obviously it's a very, very short group of words, you know, after I think it's like 80 pages or something into the book. A lot of stuff has come before that, and it's yeah, what problems means there is way more objective than just what people like or dislike.
Yeah, and we can let our ideas die in our place. We can survive, but our ideas might not.
Yeah, I minimized my version. I'm just reading it off your screen. It's easier to keep in sync, otherwise I was not keeping up.
Okay, moving on. Inadequate quoting, lack of text analysis. And then I quote Werner and say he clarified what he meant by entrenched. So she's being unreasonable again. I think we can just keep going.
Yep.
Yeah, this one was nasty.
Yeah. It's it's one of those things where because like no one's drawing a line between good and bad traditions, it's much harder for her to talk about it rationally because she hasn't drawn that line, in the sense that you don't even need to necessarily define it, just know that some are good and some are bad. Arguably there must be good ones out there because the source of new knowledge is unpredictable. But yeah, but it's like to carte blanche say that we can make anything compatible is ridiculous. Also, Berner, just thinking about what you've highlighted there, Berner was making the point of CR people not adopting other techniques or other traditions, not like spreading CR particularly. So I feel like Lulie's like done another change of goalposts here.
Okay, I kept reading. This part I think is notable. So she hints that she's Dee Dee's representative because she says, people are getting interested via Deutsch, and then in parentheses, who is himself still writing about critical rationalism. This hints that she has insider knowledge, which is true, and but she's lying about what the situation is, like how positive her insider knowledge looks.
Like
But
she was
more
his
than that,
editor or something.
no, what I mean is, she has knowledge of what writing he's doing, but she's saying he's writing stuff, it's going great, when she has knowledge that it's not going great.
Yeah.
So she has knowledge, but she's then lying about the contents of that knowledge. To make it sound like the knowledge says everything's great, so positive, whereas everything's not great, negative. And then on top of that, she's not his representative. And if directly asked, she wouldn't claim to represent him. But she
Yep.
hinted at it, and people aren't going to ask. So they'll sort of get the impression. And that's bad.
So one thing that occurs to me as a difference, I'll just put it in tutoring. Try and bring it up on the screen as well.
And by representative, I mean, so she is an associate of his, but she's not in a position to speak for him or like accurately share what his views are. And she's suggesting that she is that kind of thing.
So one of the posts I made in response to this thread that this is on is like quite a long thread, but I like responded to a thing particularly about this guy saying in reference to DD, he'd like to ask DD if he maintains a distinction between values and preferences, morality, and well-formed desire. Anyway, it's so what's sort of an interesting difference between Lulie's thing and mine. So
Yeah, I
every
see.
time I've talked about what I think he'd say is like, you know, I separate my comment. I think he'd add, I'm hedging. Then I explicitly sort of pointed out, like, I mean, this is something that I've started to value a lot more since participating in FI, but it's sort of, yeah, an interesting sort of comparison maybe. Um,
Okay, second pass. So this makes the themes more obvious because we don't get lost in the details.
yep.
Not sympathetic. Adversarial reinterpretation. Just keeps like straw manning people. Assertion, unfair question. Putting words in our opponent's mouth. Putting words in our opponent's mouth. Putting words in our opponent's mouth. No evidence assertions.
So it's all just, yeah, it's reframing.
Making up what our opponents mean.
Yeah.
Lies about current world situation.
Yeah. It's all that she keeps it vague enough, I think is sort of important to make that sort of thing acceptable. Like it's if you do it vaguely, then people are much more ready to think, whereas if to accept it, whereas if she went into detail about each of those things, then I don't think it would be nearly as welcome.
Yeah, I like the second and third pass. I think if someone read the first one, they'd like sort of forget things and not put it all together well. So it's good to have some like summing up
Yeah. Yep.
where you get the big
Yeah.
picture.
I noticed when we did RSPs that I forgot to do it for his quote. I think I did it for Lulie's, but yeah.
Her themes are misrepresenting her opponent's positions and making assertions. Why would anyone listen? They're not precise readers. They judge things by impression of the author and by social vibes. She's trying to present herself as a wise authority, which is ironic because she's claiming that critical discussion works well with regular people, but then the way she's dealing with regular people is by social signaling that she's an authority. She uses social games disguised as critical discussion instead of actual critical discussion. Post is socially calibrated. There's skill in it, but it's social skill, not rational skill. But
Yep.
like, some people read that and actually have a high opinion of it.
Yep. I think most people do. It's an easy shortcut to make. All right. I remember last week we were talking about maybe organizing some discussion trees and stuff.
Yeah.
And there were either either one of yours or you found the thing I posted on Best Wrong that was maybe an option too.
Yeah. Before we move on, so how far are you on the videos?
Oh, not particularly. I think I'm partway through 3.
Okay.
Out of 6, is it?
Yeah. I think it'd be good to go through them quickly while the stuff is still fresh in your mind.
Yeah, yeah.
Also,
It'll be
I
easy now, and then
remember 4 as being interesting because it uses grammar stuff and then it gets some other info that wasn't coming up in the other analysis. Like I thought it found some different points.
Oh, okay, cool.
The grammar stuff
Yes,
is fairly simple also. It's not like, really tricky grammar stuff. It's a lot of stuff is like what's the subject of the sentence, like where's she putting her emphasis, and what is she putting in like nested parts of the sentence.
Yep, yep. Cool. I should be able to do all that before next session then. I don't have to worry about spoilers or anything. I was going to say as well, just before we go on, that I might just go to the bathroom quickly. Be back in a tick.
Okay.
Oh yeah, this was
Yeah, I was skimming through, they looked okay, and then I got to this. Do you see any issue here?
yeah, preposition. Well, prepositions leading to a noun.
Yeah, they should
Is
lead to a
when
noun, but you have a clause here.
and when is a preposition, isn't it? Like
It is not, no.
conjunction. That's why. Yep.
Adverb,
So
relative adverb, conjunction, not preposition.
yeah, there's a few. So when, for, if, these are like those sort of things I sometimes if I'm not paying enough attention, I will miscategorize them.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's a relative adverb here.
um, so if it's a relative adverb, I'm not sure if there are any different rules for how to like deal with relative adverbs versus adverbs, or whether it just means that there's a reference. Um,
Relative
so
adverbs means, relative means conjunction, or it's, relating things is what conjunctions do in a sense. So conjunctive adverb would be a better term.
yeah, okay. So that's just like a conjunction with meaning, which is just a subordinating conjunction, right? I mean, that's what it feels like in essence.
So a subordinating conjunction in general means you have like two parts of the sentence and one is subordinate to the other. A relative adverb means you have one part of the sentence and then there's a nested thing that functions as a modifier. It's like on a lower level in the tree.
Yes, yep.
Yeah, so relative adverb means it's making a section of the sentence that's smaller compared to a conjunction. Like a more
So
minor thing.
if I just changed preposition to relative adverb, would the diagram be the same?
Yeah, the structures looks okay.
Okay, so that's more like using that as well. I mean, I picked up Webster's term pro sentence, um, but like where it's
Yeah,
unlike a
it's
conjunction which has two halves of
similar
the same.
to who, what, which, that, those kind of words.
Yeah.
Which sometimes play a double role when they're functioning as a pronoun or pro-sentence or whatever. Sometimes they do the conjunction role and the stand-in for some noun role.
Yep.
But when it's a relative adverb, it's not the subject or the object of the verb, so you don't need it twice in the tree, the when.
Yep.
Okay, so we have this thread. Did you want to try to make a tree out of his post or just skip ahead to your comments?
His post is, I mean, it is titled Misc Raw Responses, so it's
Yeah,
obviously not meant to be super high quality.
it's a bit long and chaotic. I've skimmed it.
Um, I feel like that's why I've only responded to certain parts. It'd be easier to pick a subtree and look at that. Because I
Yeah,
think
by the way,
there's
did you see that I responded to him?
I did see you'd responded. I hadn't seen that he'd responded back.
It wasn't very good. He said he's interested in discussing, but probably not the best person for it. And he's not good enough at math. And his knowledge of Bayesian epistemology is a bit impressionistic. I tried asking him a question anyways, because yeah, I want literature that actually says what their position is. And it seemed like a way forward.
Yep. Yeah, it did
Okay.
occur to me that I thought your original post there was unlikely to uh be amazingly high yield in terms of what you're looking for from this, but yeah. Um,
Well, it depends what you think I'm looking for. When I write this kind of post, the main thing I'm looking for is someone who actually wants to have a discussion. If you filter on people who like have a significant preference in favor of discussing with me, it raises discussion quality a lot.
yeah.
So I was just trying to filter on only that, which I think is good enough in general. if they're sort of like biased in my favor and like me and want to talk with me and value it, it makes a big difference compared to people who don't.
I sometimes wonder how people are like finding. So I think your comment there is like eight upvotes type thing. Oh wait, no, 8 karma, 3 votes if I hover over
Yes.
it.
Okay, yeah. So they have a system where the more karma you have, the more your votes count. So a lot of people have votes that count for 2. And if you get really high karma, your vote counts for 3. But then on top of that, they have a strong vote system. So you click and hold, and then you have to log in.
Oh yeah.
But there's a click and hold for a strong vote, and then those count for even more. It can be like 10 or something if you have a lot of karma. So yeah, someone with high karma gave me a strong vote, I think is what happened.
Yep. I don't know if apparently if I give you a strong vote, it just counts as 1. So my strong votes don't count.
Yeah, you don't have enough karma to give bonus karma. Were you asking how they find it?
Um,
Like how
yeah, I
anyone
know there's
notices that comment on an old thread?
yeah, it's like a week old sort of thread, so it's not
Yeah,
super
so if
old,
you
but
go to their homepage, just lessstrong.com,
this is just a recent
and you
discussion down the bottom.
scroll down. So latest is these posts are related to post date as well as karma on the post, similar to
Oh,
Reddit.
so like
But
karma,
then you
post date, and activity.
just karma and post date, I think, not activity.
Oh, okay, because there's some posts there that seem like on the recent. There's like 8 days old was. Oh wait, no, that's 8 hours. 5 days is maybe the oldest one then. It's got like 92. Okay, yeah. No, I see. It's yeah.
Yeah,
So
5 days with 92, 2 days with 42.
it's only got 16 though, so that's
Anyway,
yeah.
so this is not how they find it. If you scroll down below there and you get to recent discussion. And this is where they just post recent comments without regard for karma, I believe. Or it might be weighted or something. But yeah, when you post a
I,
comment, it'll show up on the front page in this
I think
recent
it is.
discussion section.
I think it is slightly weighted because I had like when I was replying, there was a bunch of like I saw a bunch of my own stuff there. But there was some out of order things where other people's comments
Uh,
were in between with a different timestamp. So I
yeah, so it
suspect there's
probably falls
some
off
weight.
faster if you don't get upvotes. But even if you get no upvotes, you show up on the front page at least for a little while.
Yep.
There is a mechanism for comments on old stuff to be noticed.
That's
So
good at
that's a
least.
positive, yeah. Like Reddit doesn't have that,
No. Well,
which
Reddit's got
is
this whole. I mean, explicitly the front page is meant to change every 24 hours. But obviously that carries through to like they lock threads that are more than 6 months old, etc.
yeah. Okay, so is there a subtree you wanted to work on?
Probably the longest one is the best one to pick. I was thinking just that we've only got 15 minutes left. Um, in terms of, is it worth starting this now, or because there might be more subtree to go on next session as
Is
well.
there something else you want to work on?
I did want to talk about the what do you call it? The thing I wrote this morning.
Oh, okay, the email.
The practice. Yeah. Oh, that's not the
So
right site.
it's here.
Yeah. So I just posted the main article in, and maybe the conclusion, a little bit of the reflection in 2FI, but this has all the other stuff from the thing as well. So what do you call it? YouTube's decided that I really like old clips of House, apparently. So I was watching one of those this morning and had this idea about like diagnoses. Anyway, the post didn't pan out the way that I wanted it to, but I thought it was valuable anyway. Um, I'm not sure how much I could cut it down. I definitely could.
Yeah, I tried skimming it earlier, and I was having trouble finding a like summary of what the argument was. Or like, yeah, it was I did not immediately find your main points.
Yep. So the main thing I think I added this at the top, like later on to make it clearer, which is why it sort of doesn't show up as much. Uh, so in essence, the main points. So the start is just you're trying to find a diagnosis. You start with like 1,000 options and you whittle them down, and you end up with 25. So, and then there's like these two philosophers who I introduce, Arrow and L. Oh, I left a typo in here. This parentheses shouldn't be there. But yeah, so Arrow is the character who thinks that support exists, and I added a quantity on the interval of 0 to 1 so I could talk about it later. And L thinks arguments of support don't exist.
Yeah.
Which again I mentioned exactly 0 later. So
Yeah. L's
then
a
I
bit
just
of
talk
an
about.
unfortunate name in an article that uses E1.
Oh yeah. I didn't think about that. I just wanted to pick some names, and then anyway, Aristotle and Elliot were the two things, and I just simplified it. Also because I didn't want to like actually use your name. I realized that Arrow is not how you spell Aristotle. But it was good enough.
Yeah.
I use letters for the possible explanations. Y and Z are the main ones that we end up caring about. The first situation is just that you can decisively figure it out by trying something that only works with Y, and so you eliminate 24 options. I say, like, did we find supporting evidence for Y? The evidence of someone getting better, E1, it's a sort of situation where Arrow claims E1 supports Y, L claims E1 does not support Y because there's no supporting arguments, it just refutes A through X. But the situation is not very useful because both parties agree, essentially. So I modify it so that we can bring back one of the earlier options, Z, and then come up with some reason that it can come up at the moment, and that it fits the evidence. And so the majority, like the argument is really in this last section here under situation 1.1. So they agree that Z should have always been, like, it was wrongly eliminated to begin with, but that it's roughly understandable for whatever reason. And then where do they go from there? L doesn't have much of a problem because E1 never supported Y, so there's no reason to make any new conclusions. We're just not done when we thought we might have been done. It's particularly bad having L and then E1 in the same sentence there.
Yeah, the whole thing I think would be better with real examples instead of letters.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's hard to follow. It's overly abstract.
Yeah.
And it's halfway, which is a bit weird. Like, it's not just pure abstractions. Like, it's sort of like an example, except then like half the things are removed. But you still get things like it's a medical situation and there's a treatment and
Yeah. I had a bit of an issue here because, like, where I say just above situation 1.1, I got to this point. I mean, you can sort of see with my plan as well that I didn't get that, like, the plan didn't cover most of the article. So about situation 1.1, I started making it up as I went along, as opposed to because I didn't have any more plan to follow. I sort of thought it would fall out a bit better, and so then it becomes a bit more stream of consciousness. And yeah, so I added stuff later on, like the fact 1 through fact 4, because I thought I was going to refer to them, even though I don't think actually end up referring to them by that name, or well, by any name. And then I thought that I'd end up bringing up different parts of evidence, so that, like, I had E1 even though there's no E2. But yeah, I didn't have a good way to, like, so I've got, like, let's call this getting better part evidence 1. Because I didn't have a good way to refer to it, like, easily throughout the rest of the thing. But I probably could have just said, like, that evidence, or like the recovery. Actually, yeah, recovery would have been better. Part of that as well, because I was timing myself, I didn't sit back and revisit some of these things.
okay, so is your basic point that interpretation of evidence relies on our explanations and our model of the world. Therefore, when we change our explanations and our model of the world, we have to reevaluate the evidence and update what we think it supports?
So not particularly, because, like, we need to do that under many different like things. Like if we were just mistaken in how we were interpreting stuff, then we're going to have to update it. But particularly like there's like the relationship between the evidence and the explanation. So like E1 supporting explanation Y, that relationship needs to be reevaluated. So in a no supporting arguments view, the relationship of evidence to like ideas doesn't change unless we were mistaken about that like interpretation in a like a fundamental way. Like we realized that we were using the ruler incorrectly, so anything regarding like distance or length is off or something like that. But that's like there's a mistake and there's a way to fix it. In the supporting arguments thing, then the measurement that you take is it's like you update that when new evidence happens or when new knowledge is created or uncovered or whatever else, when you learn new things, but there's no associated mistake. It's like you update it, but there's nothing it's correcting besides that, oh, I need to adjust now. It's so the first statement like is all of the statements in the no supporting arguments camp can be like objectively sound things, statements, ideas. But in the no supporting or in the supporting arguments camp, those sort of statements don't like people might argue that they're objectively sound both before and after, not that the mistake was always there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, they're saying we did the best we could given the evidence, and then we got new evidence, and then we did the best we could again, and so on and so forth.
Yep.
You get that from objectivists as well sometimes.
So and while I agree with that insofar as like when things are right or wrong, like if we learn something new and a theory turns out to be wrong, then obviously we do the best we could with the knowledge we have at the time. But the idea that this like argument supports this option is like cannot be an objectively true statement unless that support is zero, because that always depends on what you know. And while ultimately judging whether an idea is like refuted or not depends on what you know too, you can learn new things and not change your mind on whether an idea is refuted or not, but you still have to like the introduction of a new option, even though nothing has been refuted and you're not any further to like finding out whether option Y is correct or not, or whatever in this case, you now have to change something, but the only mistake involved with that was not knowing about other options. And part of the problem with that is there's infinitely many other options. Like we don't bother thinking about many of them. But there's potentially infinitely many good options as well that we just don't like think of, either because they're like complex or involve, require us to think of other things first or whatever else. So it's like the statement that like this argument supports this idea is something that like you could only ever come up with a value to represent that like within your particular context in your particular mind. It has nothing to do with objective reality. So if you're interested in the idea of whether arguments can support something or not objectively, then I think that puts a constraint on the support. And like one of the important properties of something that should be objectively true like that, if some evidence supports some idea or argument, then that should not change because you learned something that doesn't actually offer a criticism for that besides its own existence. Because we could always come up with something new anyway. So because like if we say that like the amount of support it provides should like remain constant until we actually actually end up with a criticism or with learning whether it was right or not type thing, because that like that support should be an amount that you can measure objectively and which doesn't rely on learning new things that aren't criticisms or or that provide a criticism of the other option, because it relies on like these other things that you can create over here. That means that this like has to be like whatever number you come up with for support has to be constant regardless of which new ideas you introduce. It doesn't make something less likely to be true just because you learn something new, it was always less likely to be true under that sort of thing if it was less likely. Obviously, that's using their language. There's only one number that
Yeah,
satisfies that though, which is 0.
I'm kind of unclear on why they can't update the support and say that it represents their confidence given current knowledge or something, rather than like objective underlying reality. It's about our knowledge of reality, and it talks about our uncertainty. Overall, I think that this is too chaotic. It's very hard to follow. I think for this you'd probably need an idea tree to like organize it in a structured way, and like to put some time into editing it down to the core points, and so that you like, yeah, if you had a structured tree with just the main points and real examples, it might be easier to follow. But I don't recommend working on that currently, because I don't know what the goal of doing that would be. You need significant knowledge of people's problem situations that you're going to try to engage with. Like, if you're trying to change people's mind or something, you need to understand what they think and why they think it enough to be able to engage with them. And so if you could start doing things like quoting from their literature to say, like, you guys think this, quote, you know, and responding to it, then it would help more in terms of outreach or something. But that's, you should get CR views clearer first, for example, before focusing on that kind of thing. Like, there's a lot of stuff you can do for yourself and getting your own ideas in life in order before putting like a lot of work into outreach and understanding their various misconceptions and going through their literature and so on, if you want to do that and talk with them.
So yeah, so I like this is separate from the less wrong stuff. So obviously I've been thinking about some of it because it's a bit related. I guess the goal, or I've had various goals throughout writing this. Like, it started just as like an excuse to do more writing practice because I was unhappy about not doing it. And because this idea was like fresh in my mind, it was like, okay, I'll write about this. So I definitely knew that early on, like in terms of my timings at the bottom there.
Is that over an hour?
Yeah. So
That's
that was
quite
like,
different than the original goal.
yes, yeah. Um, the the last time that I ended up knowing that I was going to be well out, I just stopped doing it. So I sort of wanted to keep doing it now to like finish it off and sort of see if I learnt anything new. I did get some good information about like signals that I give myself in terms of planning and stuff, and the fact that I spent 10 minutes planning just in dot points and didn't even get to the end of, or like halfway through where I ended up going. Um, anyway, I think
Yeah,
there's like some stuff that I can learn from this. But then as I
this,
got towards the end, the
it
idea of
strikes
finding
me
some
sort of as pre-writing. Like, if you write like this like 5 times, like each day in a row, you do this kind of write, then the next time you try to write it, you might be able to come up with something better because you've gotten like the practice and tried writing about it a bunch of different ways. Like, it's a step in sorting out your thoughts, but you're not like there yet or done yet.
Oh no, no, yeah. So yeah, that's good though. That's made some of the like thoughts on my own writing clearer, which is good. I guess my reason for adding it to the quick check thing was just to see whether this idea that logically all support has to be 0 because you like want to make objective statements. I mean, it seems like it's sort of hard to reason about it in a few ways, or because like it's hard to reason from people's points of view that you don't agree with. I think to an extent.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's easier.
right. It'd be easier to make a claim like that if you had a specific theory of how
Mm,
support works that someone had actually claimed, and then you showed that in their system they have this problem. that like
Yep.
violates their goals or their beliefs about how their system works or something.
Yeah. So, I mean, evidence for that, I've just said that support can be quantified in 0 to 1, which most people would say, like, unlikely or whatever else, like have different quantifiers. But I've just sort of like introduced a few times. I've just introduced stuff that's taken from what I legitimately think some people think, but without relating it back to their thing. I try to make it too general, I guess, is part of that. Like I was writing about a medical
Yeah,
thing,
it's
but
easier to talk to a more specific audience than a less specific one usually.
yep. Yeah. No, okay, cool. I'm still glad that I spent some time writing some stuff and actually doing that because I hadn't done it in like a week.
Yeah, practicing writing is good. But I think you generally benefit from easier topics.
Yes, yeah, yep. No, I agree. This was just because I was like somewhat inspired about that topic at the time. But yeah,
Okay.
you can see that I gave up editing. Cool.
Yeah, so try to get through those videos and maybe look at some of the analyzing lies PDFs as well,
Yep,
possibly. See you next time.
sounds good. See you in 2 days.